Hey guys, Victor here coming at you with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be covering Darkworld, which is a deck that pretty much just aims to loop your opponent's entire hand away from them and force them to play with just the one single card that they're drawing for turn. And let's face it, with the way that this deck plays, they're not going to be able to do that just because you're constantly going to have multiple interruptions out that are basically going to stop them from being able to win the game. So in a sense, this is a deck where if you win the die roll, you win the game. And I know that sounds really broken, which, it is. But the reason this deck isn't very good is just because there are a lot of counters to it currently in the metagame in the form of cards like Dimension Shifter and the Bestials, which just completely stop this deck. And that's not even to mention cards like Draw and Lockbird, which will definitely rise up in popularity as the year progresses. Especially thanks to the fact that Appaloosa's banned, which is actually one of the major hits that this deck received. Even so, though, this deck is still very powerful and is very easy to accomplish the goal that it has set in mind, which is, once again, looping your opponent's entire hand away. So with that, let's just jump straight into it. Now, as always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and we're of course going to be playing 3 Genta, Gateman of Darkworld. So this card is by far one of, if not the most important pieces of the entire deck, as you're just able to discard it, and then you're able to search out the Gates of Darkworld, which is pretty much going to be like one of your main consistency pieces. And as if that wasn't good enough, that effect isn't a once per turn, right? So traditionally in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, these types of effects that search out another card would be a hard once per turns, but for whatever reason they decided to make Genta be able to search it out as many times as possible, which we're going to be greatly appreciative for and take advantage of it while we can. So this card is basically just never going to be like a real brick. And as if that wasn't also good enough, when this card is banished and you control a face-up Darkworld card, it's able to special summon it, special summon itself. So it's a free extender that also searches one of your key pieces. You definitely got to play 3 of this if you want to play Darkworld. And then to accompany our 3 Gentas, we're playing 3 Snoww, Unlight of Darkworld, where on discard it's able to search out any Darkworld card. Pretty straightforward. And then for the final 3 of Darkworld monster, we're playing 3 Reign-beaux Overking of Darkworld, who, when it's discarded, is able to search your deck for any level 5 or higher Darkworld monster. Now, this card also has another ability where you're able to bounce back any level 7 or lower Darkworld monsters to your hand, and then special summon this card, which is one of the main things that this deck does, right? Whether it's through Reign-beaux or through the OG Grapha, you bounce back key Darkworld pieces and then continue to refill your hand to just continue digging through your deck. And the cool part about this, though, or I guess uncool depending on what side of the field you're sitting on, is that this effect doesn't activate. It's an inherent summon, so if your opponent wants to stop it with like a Bestial or a DD Crow, for example, they have to do it preemptively, because once you're already attempting to use the Reign-beaux, it's already too late and they can't respond to it. So, just something to keep in mind if you decide to pick this deck up, and so that you don't lose to a potential cheat, because it's going to happen at some point where your opponent can say, I'm going to chain my Bestial Magnamut. And you're like, okay. And if you're not well versed in the deck, it's a very common way, and it's a very common way that people tend to lose, especially when they're unfamiliar with the cards. So, just be aware. And then I mentioned Grapha earlier, and we are playing 2 of the OG Grapha. I don't feel like you need to play 3 of this card just because it really doesn't do anything to help you accomplish your game plan. And more often than not, it is going to be like a brick, because it doesn't help you in your consistency in any which way. It's basically just when this card is discarded, you get to pop a card. However, much like Reign-beaux, it's able to bounce back any Darkworld monster you control back to your hand in order to special summon itself, and it also doesn't activate. And what you typically want to do, right, is say, for example, you've gone Genta, add Gates, banish Genta, Genta summons itself back. So what you can do is you can bounce that back with Reign-beaux, and then you bounce Reign-beaux back with Grapha, and just like that, you've basically refilled your hand with another Genta search for potential gates. You can discard your Reign-beaux that you just added, and you still have the Grapha on field to just threaten your opponent with a 3000k attack because it's boosted by 300 by gates. So yeah, when I say things get out of hand really quickly, I really do mean it. Whether this deck is trying to swarm the field or just flood it with big high boss monsters or whatever it's trying to do at the moment, things do get pretty crazy pretty quickly. Then for the other 2 that we're playing for the Darkworld monsters, we're playing 2 Sillva, Warlord of Darkworld. So when this card is discarded, it's able to special summon itself back. But the real power in Sillva comes from its secondary effect, where if it's discarded by an opponent's card effect, not only does it special summon itself back, but it's also able to loop your opponent's hand for exactly 2 cards. So if they have 2 or more cards, you summon Sillva, you activate it, and then they have to put 2 cards back into their deck, and to the bottom of their deck in whatever order they choose. But even so, you're essentially just going to be able to hand loop them from their entire hand, as you're going to be summoning Sillva at least twice, and then we have a couple of other cards to get rid of that final card. And there's no way any deck can beat Darkworld once they've had their entire hand looped and they're top decking for turn. So Yeah, Sillva, very degenerate. And the main way that we're going to try and get the Sillva effect to activate is through Ceruli, Guru of Darkworld, where when it's discarded, you special summon this card back to your opponent's side of the field, and then when this card is special summoned, your opponent discards one card. So, you give them the Ceruli will activate, you discard the Sillva will come back and loop them for 2 because it is treated as their monster, even though it was originally yours. So, yeah, pretty degenerate stuff, but that's what Darkworlds do, right? So, gotta play it. And that's it for the Darkworld monsters. And then we are playing some danger monsters to accompany our Darkworld cards. So we've got the 2 danger Nessies, the 1 danger Bigfoot, the 1 danger Mothman, the 1 danger Chupacabra, the 1 danger Tsuchinoko, and the 1 danger Jackalope. Nothing much to say. You reveal them, and then your opponent randomly chooses 1 card out of your hand to discard. Sometimes you hit the danger and you'll feel bad. Sometimes you hit the Darkworld card and you feel great. But yeah, it's just an element of luck that's trying to help a naturally bricky deck try to combo off more successfully. So yeah, you got to include them, even though I'm not the biggest danger fan. And then for the final monsters that we're playing, we're still going to be rocking 3 Gen the Diamond Tiger and 1 Ken the Warrior Dragon. So I know a lot of people don't really enjoy playing Gen and Ken, but I don't know. I just feel like they're too degenerate to not play, right? Just because with Gen, you're able, when it's like on the field, whenever you pretty much want, during the main phase, you're able to activate its effect to special summon a Ken from either your hand or your deck to your opponent's side of the field. And then Ken essentially acts as like a Ceruli, but it's even better because you get to draw 2 cards before you have to discard. So, if this combo resolves, the chances of you winning are basically just like automatic. And even if it's not, right, like at worst, this card is going to be baiting out something like an Imperm or an Effect Veiler, just because it really is that threatening, right? Your opponent isn't going to want you to draw 2 cards and get a potential secondary effect off of like a Sillva or even your Snoww or Grapha or whatever. So yeah, if your opponent has something to stop it, they will always waste it. And since you don't really use up your normal summon either, this card is just basically like the perfect card to just help you accomplish your game plan as smoothly as possible. And with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Now, I know I said this portion would be the spell and trap portion of the video, but this deck plays no traps, so it's essentially just the spell portion of the deck. As the entire purpose of this deck is to win on turn 1, there is no turn 2 and 3, right? You're either looping your opponent's entire hand or you're just not playing. Simple as that. But even so, we are of course going to be playing 3 Dark Corridor. Now, I say of course, but let's be real, a lot of Darkworld players really just do not enjoy Dark Corridor at 3 because it's a hard once per turn, and they would much rather prefer to play either 2, maybe even potentially 1. But to that I say, that's stupid. Like, just because a card is a hard once per turn doesn't mean you shouldn't max out on it. Like, imagine playing Snake Eyes, for example, and saying Bonfire is a hard once per turn. I should only be playing 1. Like, no, you're an idiot. You have to be playing 3 for maximum consistency, even if you are going to potentially draw multiples, just because the card really is that damn good. As what it does is you search your deck for any Darkworld card and you discard a card. You don't have to discard the card you add, but it literally gives you access to whatever combo piece or line that your deck currently needs at that moment. So, just being able to have a card like that at any given time is just invaluable. And if you do open multiples, it's not the end of the world, because we do play cards such as like Dangers and Ken and Gen, where you have options to be able to discard them, right? It's not like they're just going to be blindly in your hand forever for the entire rest of the game. And if for some reason you do somehow go to like the next follow-up turn, it's also just like another phenomenal starter to get your engine going again, because I don't know, say you get hit by Drone Lockbird, for example, or a Dimension Shifter, and you somehow manage to survive a turn, you're going to want another copy of this in your hand to just try and accomplish your combos all over again on the follow-up. So yeah, you got to play 3. I don't believe in playing something like this at 2. It just makes no sense to me. But you can tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm sure you guys have plenty to say. Yeah, but then for the other 3 ofs, we're still going to be playing 3 The Gates of Darkworld. Much like Dark Corridor, I've seen a lot of people cut this down to 2 just because I don't really know why. I guess technically it does end up breaking if you don't have like enough fodder in the graveyard, but it's also just another really good consistency piece that allows you to draw through your entire deck. And since we're not playing cards like Zephyros to bounce us back to our hand to try and again, I definitely feel like you have to play with 3. And then for the final 3 of consistency piece, we're going to be playing 3 Allure of Darkness. We're just going to pretend Drone Lockbird doesn't exist, even though it is going to become more popular in the upcoming formats. But as of right now, it's not. So we're just going to pretend that card doesn't exist. We're going to activate Allure, draw 2 banished dark monster that we don't need, and just continue to dig through our deck even deeper. And that's it for the 3-0s. And then we just play a bunch of 1-0s after that. So you play the 1 Darkworld Archives, which is basically just like a free discard. You play the 1 Darkworld Accession, which is going to allow you to summon out your Fusion Grapha. You play the 1 Call by the Grave to potentially stop Dimension Shifter. Probably not, but you know, it's nice to have a dream that it could happen. We play the 1 Triple Tactics Thrust, as thanks to the addition of Ken and Gen and Ceruli. This card essentially allows you to finish searching out the final piece of your deck to loop your opponent's hand, which will be the Triple Tactics talent. As you know, you rip their hand apart twice with Sillva. They have 1 card left. Sillva won't be able to activate again because it has to get rid of two exactly. So you're just going to use talent to get rid of that final card instead. And if you're going second, it's still another phenomenal card that you can search out to just potentially break your opponent's board by stealing a monster or drawing 2 cards. No matter what it does, it's just a phenomenal card. And then for the final card, we play our big bomb, being card destruction. So both players discard their hands and then draw the same number of cards. If you discard 4 Darkworld cards, you win the game. Simple as that. And with that, that's the main deck. 40 cards like always. Now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now, when it comes to the extra deck, it actually suffered a pretty major blow with the recent banning of Appaloosa, just because that was one of the more common end pieces this deck has strived to achieve. But even so, the deck is still phenomenal at what it's able to accomplish with the cards in the extra deck. So with that in mind, we're going to be starting off with the Link monsters first, being the 1 Security Dragon and the 1 Akashic Magician, whose only purpose is to basically just bounce back the Cerulis back to your hand to try and loop your opponent's hand away from them again. But there are certain situations where you just need to bounce something like a Genta, for example, back to your hand to search out like another Gates of the Darkworld to try and luck your way into like another combo piece. But yeah, these cards, like I said, they're just there to bounce back Cerulis and maybe Gentas or just something, you know, something like that. Then we're still playing the 1 Dark because this deck is made up entirely of dark monsters, and you are going to be playing against someone that has Bestials, Dimension Shifter, Diabellstar, the Black Witch, you know, all these other dark monsters that you can just take and then proceed to either rank up with, or I guess link up would be the proper phrase, I'm not really sure, or just have as like a menacing body on the field to go for game. And then for other links, we're still playing the 1 Muckraker from the Underworld. You discard a card, and then you get to reborn a Fiend monster from your graveyard. You got the 1 IP Masquerena, whose only purpose is to summon out the SP Little Knight, and that's it for the Link 2s. But we do play a couple of other links, being the 1 Saryusha Skuldread. I love this card in this deck just because you play so many different monsters that it's very easy to hit 4 cards in the field. And there are times where you just need to get those guys off the field and just draw deeper into your deck. And so you should just pretty much does that exactly, as if you're able to use 4 monsters to link summon this card, you draw 4 and then put 3 cards from your hand back to the bottom of your deck. And it also does like a lot of other really cool stuff, right? So it boosts your monster's attacks, or just boosts any monster's attack that's summoned to a zone it points to. You can special summon from your hand once per turn. So if you have like a Grapha and a Reign-beaux in your graveyard, you know, just summon out like a Darkworld monster like a Snoww or something from your hand onto the field, and then you can bounce those back and just quickly overwhelm your opponent through sheer might. And yeah, this card is just, I really love this card. I cannot stress this enough. I think Saryusha is such a really cool card that really does find its place in decks like Darkworld. Then for the final Link monster, we're playing 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. We have space because we did lose Appaloosa, and I figured this deck does have a pretty difficult time outing towers like monsters, so we might as well throw in the Underworld Goddess and see what it can deal with, you know. And if you decide not to make the SP Little Knight, this is also like another valid option that you can make, right? Through your IP at Masquerena, as you're just able to use one of your opponent's Link monsters with the IP Masquerena, and then depending on what they have, when this card is summoned, it can negate all your opponent's monsters on the summon. So you know, just a really solid card that allows you to play your deck a little bit differently depending on what the situation calls for. And that's it for the Link monsters. And then we do play a couple of Exceed monsters, being the 1 number 41 Bagooska, the Terribly Tired Tapir. This is basically just here for when you get hit by Droll or Dimension Shifter. You need to buy yourself a turn to survive. It's not always going to work, but you know, it's something. Then you have number 60 Dugares, the Timeless. We only really care about the draw 2, discard 1 effect. Then we have Coach King Giantrainer, which is essentially going to be your time card. It takes 3 level 8 monsters, but you just detach 1 material, you draw a card. If it's a monster, you burn your opponent, and you get to try that effect up to 3 times. And since our deck is basically made up of a majority of monsters, it's bound to hit something at some point. Then for the other rank 8 Exceed, we're actually going to be playing 1 the Zombie Vampire. So this card, it's pretty okay. You know, you detach 1, you special summon 1 monster that you mill out of the 8 cards, because it's going to mill 4 from the top of your deck and 4 from the top of your opponent's deck. So it's a really solid way to be able to fill your graveyard up with cards like Genta, Grapha, and Reign-beaux, as well as just being able to set up some kind of board presence. And this card truly shines when you're getting hit by something like Droll and Lockbird, right? As you may not be able to search or draw from your deck anymore, but you can at least mill and hopefully get something that can allow you to just full combo your opponent anyways. But you know, this is definitely more of like one of those last resort type of cards, but still pretty phenomenal. And then for the final Exceed monster, we're playing 1 Super Starslayer Ty-phon Sky Crisis. Sometimes you're not going to win the die roll, you know, so if you're able to force out most of your opponent's cards, hopefully you can just drop the Ty-phon eventually and then maybe stall out a turn. Probably not. Normally when people summon Ty-phon, it means that you're like in a really bad shape, but it's better to have the option and not need it than need it and not have the option, you know. But yeah, that's it for the Exceed monsters. And then for the fusions, we're just playing 2 Grapha, Dragon Overlord, or Darkworld, where it's like a pseudo negate, so you're able to change like a monster effect or a normal spell and trap effect to your opponent discards 1 card. So you know, it's okay. It protects you. That discard could come up pretty like decently, right? Especially if you're able to hit like I don't know, another Sillva to make yourself, or to make your opponent discard 2 cards. You're hitting Graph for the double pop. It does come up pretty frequently. And with that, that's the Darkworld deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.